So I went through a whole period of learning, and I think most natural musicians learn by ear first. I was picking tunes out when I was 4 on ukuleles because my little fingers couldn't do the guitar stuff, and that was later. And so I made commitments to myself, like when I was 14 and 16, and that I was going to not be what I call a faker, where it's just like a strumming, like a very low level. No, well, don't mean that insultingly.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But
one thing you got to give to the rappers and to hip hop is they do have what you were talking about earlier, which is a story. Like
that's true.
They
absolutely
definitely have that. They got the lyrics covered.
Right. They've got poetry, and that is a part of the art, and that's true. And I agree totally. And who really is the real Slim Shady?
I think we still know.
It's not me. I got too much stomach.
It was never revealed.
I've been too many buffets for that.
But we have to find that out. It should be our life course, shouldn't it?
Hey.
We should do it. We got to find it out.
Welcome to Mosaic Minds, the podcast where every episode is a colorful blend of perspectives, ideas, and conversation. Each week, our diverse team of hosts brings their unique backgrounds, experiences, and interests to the table. Mosaic Minds is your invitation to join the conversation to see the world through a kaleidoscope of viewpoints. So grab a seat, tune in, and let the mosaic unfold before you.
Yeah.
All right.
Our discussion today will be the death penalty.
We're going to talk about guns, country, and God.
Yeah, that's right. But not necessarily in that order.
Not in that order, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Mosaic Minds podcast. My name's Nick. This is Jason. And tonight we are joined by a true master of his craft, Jonathan Taylor. I'm excited about this one because, being a guitar player myself, he is a leading classical guitarist and has performed all over the world internationally, done some groundbreaking compositions, and has a unique ability to bring emotion to every note from everything that I have researched. But I'm going to kind of stop there. And Jonathan, first of all, welcome to the show. And I just want you to kind of give us a background of I know you have a really interesting and vast history, but I just kind of want you to give us a background of what you've done, how you kind of got started in music, and where you're going right now.
Well, right now I'm actually in negotiations with a new contract for my catalog. I have 32 albums, 310 tracks that I own, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney doesn't own his catalog. So that's why I'm saying that, but he sold a hell of a lot more than me. So background, my grandmother was a silent film organist and played with all the notables of that era, so she was playing around the house, so to speak. And then I had experiences of listening to Segovia's records and Parkening and the Romeros and that, Pepe Romero, and later on studied with all of them. Met Segovia, didn't study with Segovia. And but I heard Segovia in Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in downtown LA, and I was just captivated. I go, this guy doesn't need 4 people. He's contained within himself a complete position. And not only was I impressed with his technical prowess and the beauty of his music, the emotion, as you were saying, but also that he was complete. He did not need other people to play with, accompany him. Yeah, you can do concertos. Yeah, you can do other things, but it wasn't required to play the Bach lute suites, for instance, or Spanish. So I went through a whole period of learning, and I think most natural musicians learn by ear first. I was picking tunes out when I was 4 on ukuleles because my little fingers couldn't do the guitar stuff, and that was later. And so I made commitments to myself, like when I was 14 and 16, and that I was going to not be what I call a faker, where it's just like a strumming, like a very low level. No, well, don't mean that insultingly.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But I mean, yeah. I wanted to be, to master the craft and not just be a dilettante or not just
Sure.
be, popularity because the song is popular or something,
Right.
a gimmick song or that. So those ideas take you down a myriad of paths. And went to college, went to study on full presidential scholarship at Chapman College back when it was a college, not a university, 850 people, private students, studied in the homes of some of the greatest masters of the 20th century, Pepe Romero. 5 years I was accepted as a student. His house, the master classes, Christopher Parkening, Frederick Noad, who had the PBS series years ago called Playing Guitar and had a best-selling book called Playing Guitar. And other notables, Joe Pass, the great jazz guitarist. And so that kind of is a little bit of the educational history.
Okay. Well, I mean, I really respect what you said. And I know you were kind of kidding around when it came. You said, with kind of faking it with the strumming. I mean, I'll be honest. Like when I learned to play the guitar with the way that I know it, I did it for the reason that most, young guys learn to play the guitar, and that was, to try to pick up girls, right? So like, I wanted to, I just thought it was cool, and I wanted to learn to play the guitar, But you're right. Like for you going into it the way that you did it, and you went into it all in with emotion, and you made this your life. So I mean that's an incredible story, I think.
Thank you. There's a great Asian cellist. I'm not going to mention his name. And he is now older and had a long career. And he said something to the effect of, I would go out there and try to play each piece perfectly. And then I realized that it was really about communication between yourself and the audience and having that expression. And, when I listened to this, I said, Jesus Christ, I knew that when I was 10, and I go, but that culture has an emphasis on perfection, right?
Yeah.
That Asian culture has an emphasis that says, you number one, right? And, if you're not number one, kill yourself when you're 13, Harry Carey. And, so, I mean, that's a whole, but I wasn't raised in that culture, you see. So, he had that. And, so I'm just saying that because he realized also that, perfection is the most boring thing in the world. And that idea of perfection that is oftentimes used in music, I go, well, I don't want to be perfect. I go, if you're perfect, that means you don't grow. It means you don't expand your horizons. And as we know that any mind that had been expanded can never return to its original dimensions. So that means that you have grown. It's proof of that. And so, but that idea of perfection, I go, well, what the hell does it mean? A computer can play faster and more accurately than you, but nobody's home. Nobody's home.
Yeah.
When I was in college.
So, I mean, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I was in college, believe it or not, I know it's a different genre of music, but I listened to Lawrence Welk and the local PBS affiliate. So believe it or not, I've probably watched 500 episodes or more of the Lawrence Welk program. The reason I'm mentioning that is...
and Bobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Sissy and Bobby are going to dance for you.
Absolutely. And what was cool...
And Dennis Day is going to sing for you.
There you go. So if I look at it like, being from California, that if a bottle washes up, right, and it's got composed music in it, explain to me how some of these music compositions have stood the test of time and be 200-300 years old and still be as dramatic and perfect as they were 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. Speak on that a little bit and then bring it back to today with your kind of spin or take on that.
To have a valid musical idea, it means you have to have something to say. And many artists have nothing to say and keep saying
it. Like it. Love it. Yeah.
And so what does it mean to be Bach? Why is he a genius? Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because that speaks to his composition. Bach never innovated a new form, ever. In other words, he never was like Debussy, who began to C not functional tonality, but parallel ninth. So he just started to destroy the major minor system. Wagner took it to the next step. And then finally it was destroyed with Schoenberg, and dodecaphony came into being. So, in other words, even though Bach never innovated a new form, well, why is he revered? I go, it is, what it is saying is polyphonic, number one, many voiced. In other words, there are many things going on. One of the great marks of a genius is that they can hold 2, 3, 4 ideas in your head without becoming confused. Most people, 2 ideas, and they're like this with the ideas, right? Sign of maturity is to listen to an idea foreign to you and not judge it, meaning try to listen to what it's saying, and then if you can incorporate some of that into your ideas. So why is a composition that is that old valid? Because the place that it's coming from is a deeper part than just the society. Like, for example, Taylor Swift. She'll be dead, and nobody will ever remember her. All right, she's a very pretty girl, all that stuff. All right, but the truth is, the Bach is going to last till the end of time, till this incinerates in the sun, whatever. But somebody like that, I go, well, why? And I go, because there's nothing to be said. It can also be validly said that nothing is new past Stravinsky's and the 3 ballets, meaning Patricia and Le Sacre du Printemps, The Rite of Spring, and Firebird. I go, well, you could probably legitimately say nothing new has been said. Mm-hmm. And that's more than 100 years ago. Well, am I getting too down in the weeds here?
No, I like it. I love education. A lot of life lessons intertwined in the music.
Yeah, that actually, I don't mean to.
Yeah. No, you're good. That actually that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about Taylor Swift, and earlier I was thinking, based on your love for music, your passion, and that you've devoted your whole life to it, I don't think anybody can argue that some of the newer musicians are talented, but can you, would you say there's a difference between what you would call music and what you would call art when it comes to audio stuff? You know what I mean? Like, if it comes, let's take whether it's rap, whether it's pop.
There is
pop music.
no rap song. There is no rap song that is going to be here in 100 years, and Bach and Beethoven and Chopin and Debussy, etc., ad infinitum on the spectrum there, will be forever. Let me give you an example of the kismet or the happenstance of why Bach's music is actually even known today. So in a generation after, maybe 2 generations, or 70 years after Bach croaked, and the Baroque period is defined by his life, 1685 to 1750, and had 3 sons that became prominent. I don't want to play like Dad. He's a square. I want the new style like Mozart. Right?
Yeah.
So I go, every generation's cry. So now, it's 70 years after Bach croaked. Nobody know who the F Bach was. Yeah. And why is that? And I go, well, you're running around in a carriage. And,
there's no iPhones.
He never, there are no iPhones, one Android.
Yeah.
You found one Android in an ancient monument.
Yeah.
Love it.
So what would he do? I go, well, he was born, and he never went further than 50 miles from where the place he was born. He was a Kapellmeister, meaning a choir director, in Kürzen and Weimar we call it Germany, but it's not Germany yet. It's the Austro-Hungarian Empire back in those days. And so I'll tell you a quick story about him. He hated the piano. He went and saw the new piano. He was an organist, remember. And so he went and saw a new piano like 20 miles, and he had to ride in this carriage, which is a freaking horror. All right. No paved roads, it just puts you back out of alignment, So he went and heard the piano and he hated it. He thought it sounded clunky. There was no sustain. He hated the piano. And it's very ironic since so many pieces are played on the
Yeah.
piano of Bach's, right?
Right.
So I'm going to tell you how Bach was discovered. So maybe 23-year-old Felix Mendelssohn was a conductor. You know him from his compositions probably. And he wanted to make a big splash in the Vienna society. And so he went to the library and he was looking way back in the stacks where all the moldy stuff is. And he saw St. John and St. Matthew Passions, which are choral orchestral pieces, which is for a conductor is a big whoop-de-doo, and you're now, king of the hill, right? And so he saw them, he said, my God, this is greatness. And that accidental discovery is why Bach is known by you and me.
Wow.
Because otherwise it would have just laid there rotting away, have a little mold with that cheese. And otherwise, I mean, who knows what the hell would have happened, right? So that type of kismet, that type of thing, changed the course of music history, became known as the greatest contrapuntist of all time, probably the greatest composer, arguable, but I think so. And so that gives you an idea about, and why is it lasting? I go, because it inherently has value. So if you sing row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 so what? In other words, that's not making much of a statement compared to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Yeah.
And so the complexity, just to carry it one step further, and we'll go on to something else. One of the great reasons why Western society is superior is because it has a pattern in it where people did something in terms of novels, meaning writing, in terms of music, and in terms of art as well. And what is that? And I go, exposition, development, and recapitulation. What is that? You expose the characters of the play, you expose the themes of the sonata, you develop that. In other words, it just doesn't lay there like a Chinese or Japanese kodo. That's just a monotonous thought. It's a repetition, right? Doesn't go anywhere, doesn't develop, has a limited amount to say, like row, row, row your boat. So and then what happens? I go, you have exposition, develop those things. What do? They go on a journey somewhere. And then they recapitulate. In other words, they come back and they're changed by that experience. That is true in music, Western music. It is true in the composition of a novel, right? Whatever novel, I mean, Huckleberry Finn goes down the river with Jim, right? Mm-hmm. And comes back, and with Tom Sawyer, they find the treasure. It's an adventure, right? So that formula is advanced. It's sophisticated. It requires thinking beyond the present. It's not just row, row, row your boat. Okay? It's not just that simple statement. So the reason why something lasts is it has something to say, and people relate to it. The first time I heard Debussy, I couldn't believe it. I said, what is he, at that time I wasn't as educated formally, but I said, what is he doing? How is he doing that? And that led me to, start to discover how. But he took a system, and that ethereal sound did not really exist in that way. Maybe Palestrina, you could say in some way, but I go, yeah, but not functionally. Okay? So, that type of person, Debussy, Chopin, you're satisfied by hearing that. Now, today's ears, they're trained by the radio, right?
Yeah.
Now the rappers have one part of it right. They have rhythm, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good start for them. Okay, but now you have to have melody and harmony.
Well,
Okay?
one thing you got to give
three
to
of the elements.
One thing you got to give to the rappers and to hip hop is they do have what you were talking about earlier, which is a story. Like
That's true.
You know, they
Absolutely.
definitely have that one. They got the lyrics covered.
Right. They've got poetry, and that is a part of the art, and that's true. And I agree totally. And who really is the real Slim Shady?
I don't think we still know.
It's not me. I got too much stomach.
It was never revealed.
I've been too many buffets for that.
But we have to find that out. It should be our life course, shouldn't it?
Hey.
We should do it. We got to find it out, guys.
So since you mentioned Slim Shady, let's say that in your prediction, let's say 500 years down the road, none of them. So like there will be like from this decade, from this century.
You cannot compare. What did my old composition? Can I swear on this?
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So what did my old composition teacher? A great genius. I have an orchestral background. There's serious composition and all that. And I love Elton John. When I say this, I love Elton John. But he said to me one day, I was bringing him my adaptation, my tone poem on Omar Khayyam's Rubia. And he said, Jonathan, do you know what you do when somebody says that Elton John is equal to Beethoven? And he jumped up and he said, you say, fuck you. And that was my lesson. Okay. That was my composition lesson for the day.
So did that rub off on you, Jonathan?
No. I've never said a fucking swear word in my life.
Me neither. Ever.
So
that's good.
So as you can see, I'm a free spirit, which means I'm an American.
Yeah,
absolutely. Hey, so I gotta bridge the gap. Okay, I want to establish with the audience here. I'm being brutally honest with you. I appreciate it. It's educational. I can't tell you that I recognize. How do I want to say this? I would say that my knowledge base is very low. Okay, but I've heard of some of the things. So if I give you a middle of the road bridging from where I think I am to at least bridge the road, I think the Edmund Fitzgerald song by Gordon Lightfoot comes to mind with some of the elements that you're talking about. Not from a composition standpoint.
It's a good song.
It's a great story.
And Gordon is a wonderful person.
And you're there for me. I'm there for that 5 minutes. A ship in Wisconsin. The shipyard. You can see the waves. So what I'm going to say with that is this: being a sports guy, I'm fascinated by venues. Okay. In my world, I haven't traveled outside the state because I haven't been good enough to travel outside of the state. And anything I've done sports, but I've traveled everywhere in the state. So my question for you is: the Philippines has a special place to my heart. My basketball coach in San Diego, California, is from the Philippines. Still goes back there to this day. I love their food. I love their culture. My dad was over there for several months doing something.
Oh, it's Subic Bay.
Pancit, adobo, halo, love that culture. So my question for you is: explain to me in detail so I can be by your side vicariously in a venue in the Philippines that you played, and how is that different from an American venue?
Sure. Well, it wasn't in one way, but it was maybe in another. But I played at the Film Life Theater under the sponsorship of Redemptor Romero and was on the same program series as Luciano Pavarotti, whom I met. Maybe you don't know who that is. He was a famous opera singer that passed away. And so I was playing a few concerts, and it was a very sophisticated theater, very typical Western, meaning a Western civilization theater, and it's in downtown Manila, next to the Spanish fort and Subic Bay, meaning the base there that we had, the military base.
Exactly. Yeah, very familiar with it.
Yeah. And at that time, rebels were coming out of the hills and killing people in the shopping mall. And somebody said, "Are you afraid of that?" And I go, "No, you got to die sometime." So of course, I wasn't being, stabbed by a knife at that moment. So that's I true. Could say that. So I would say that culturally, the Filipinos go to classical concerts. I mean, there are many prominent people there. And I had I stayed at the Manila Garden Hotel and had a wonderful time there. And, it's so humid that your skin, you look 20 years younger
Yeah.
because your skin is so moisturized.
Got to
Right?
overhydrate.
Yeah, but boy, in Madras, India, it's that humid too. You step outside the hotel and in 1 minute you're soaked. Don't ever wear a coat.
In one more question that I have, I'm going to make you step out of kind of the current conversation into the Mosaic Minds for just a few seconds. So what I'm curious to say is I have a Salvador Dali, okay? I know that has nothing to do with music, but he signed it, right?
It has everything to do with music. Wonderful.
Okay, great. I love it because I'm an analogy guy. So what I was going to say is
genius.
He's a legendary in that. You got your Mozarts, your Beethovens, your Bachs.
Yeah, that's right.
What I'm going to ask you though is how do those guys stay on the Mount Olympus of their music in your world and art in the world that I'm bringing you into?
The integrity of their composition. For example, the melting clock. The disparate elements are brought together in a Dali painting in order to express an idea. The time is gone. Gaia, whatever, his girlfriend, that he loves so much. You see her naked in all of them. By the way, in Century City, about right before Dali died, and he had a great exhibition there in Pasadena at the Norton Simon. I saw him once at the Norton Simon when he did it way long time ago. Right before he died. Lived in Catalans, right? Catalonian,
Yep.
Spanish. And so, you probably wouldn't be angry if you called him Spanish, he's Catalonian. So, I saw this figurine, and then I got to tell you another great Dali story. I saw this figurine in an art shop, and I was going to buy it. It was only $200. I didn't buy it. He died the next day. It was worth $5,000.
Oh, man.
No.
Yeah.
So, I hung myself. So I want to tell you a quick Dali story. They're doing a documentary on Dali. Maybe there's a 60s, 70s, I don't know. And he had the camera and the film, no digital yet. And they go to his house in the Catalan, and later on, he had burned himself. He always cooked with oil. Those Spaniards always cooked with oil. And he'd hurt himself. Anyway, so now the guy is interviewing. Unlike this interview, I don't want any comparison made. I love you guys. You guys are great guys, I can tell. So, unlike you guys, the interviewer was boring the living bejesus out of Salvador Dali. And where were you born?
Yeah, what's your favorite color?
And do you like art? And all sorts of, questions that you could see Dali was on another planet, right? And he didn't want to hear any of this. So let me tell you what happened. And this is the key to it. I go, this will show you what a genius Dali is. Just wonderful. I love him. In those days, you'd have juicy fruit or gum wrappers. And the cameraman had put a piece of gum in his mouth and tossed the aluminum wrapper on the ground. And you could see Dali, because he's on camera, and you could see Dali's eyes divert to something on the ground. You didn't know what it was yet, and because he's out of the frame. And so you see him get out of the frame, and he picks up this aluminum foil wrapping, and he starts going like this.
Just playing with it.
And he made an origami of the Man of La Mancha,
Nice.
Don Quixote.
Nice.
And he set it down on a table. And I looked at that and I said, I just love this guy. I love this guy.
Yeah.
He's a genius. Look at that. And I mean, he was, he focused on, I have little angles here. There's the spear, there's like a horse. And, in a matter of just a couple minutes, he had made, it was clearly recognizable as the Don Quixote was written by a Spaniard, a fellow Spaniard like Dali, and that was part of that culture, the mythological part of it, right? And I go, my God, it's amazing. There's a Dali story.
Yeah, he took the stance of if they're not going to make this interview interesting, I'm going to make it interesting, right?
Exactly.
Like,
I'm going to entertain myself.
Yeah, I'm going to entertain myself.
So I'll sell this to Jonathan for $200.
I want to throw a soundbite out at you, and I know that's a declaration before, but I know it's going to be. So we call stuff overrated, we call stuff underrated. Here's the question I have for you. Take the greatest composition, give me your top 5, but you don't have to because you already have. But here's what I'm going to ask you. What is one composition that one of those major artists that you really respect was able to hide behind because of the name recognition that they had, and quite frankly, it was a very poor composition. If you don't want to name by name,
No. Are you kidding me? They're dead.
Oh yeah, they can't do anything to you, right?
Their family's coming for
They're dead silent.
The ghosts are coming out of the grave. I can't think of one, but if you're going to say on the other end of the scale, one of the greatest ones is The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. As Pierre Boulez said, the birth certificate of the 20th century, many of the rhythms that you know by rock and the rap and all that. And I go, well, it's all there, So, I mean, it's been exposed, and I go, Stravinsky broke the mold. At those times, they were listening to, Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky, and they were listening to more sedate music. And his composition is quite raucous, so very bombastic in that. So, and ultimately, in the Paris premiere, not the Opera House, the other place around the corner. I've been there. I can't remember the damn name. And I go, well, he was the composer, Igor Stravinsky, was there. The promoter, Diaghilev, who was the leading promoter of the day, and then Nijinsky, the lead ballet dancer, were chased down an alley, and they were going to beat the living bejesus out of them because they were so insulted by this composition. Now, we're never insulted by anything in this era.
Never. No, no one gets offended these days.
Us.
Yeah, no one gets offended these days.
Nothing ever insults us.
Hey, since you're giving me a master... Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I should tell you a couple of Wizard of Oz stories, because we're talking about my music before, but what I've done is I've adapted many pieces heretofore not adapted for the solo classical guitar, like film music, the 007 themes of films, the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, American folk songs of the 19th century, let's say Scott Joplin, also from the ragtime era, or George Gershwin or Duke Ellington, and 19th century folk songs of Stephen Foster. And in other words, I've adapted many different types and genres of music. It was predicted about me about 30 years ago that I was going to do this. And one of the reasons why is because of the playing ability, but also compositionally. Even Villalobos couldn't write for the guitar without going through a player because he couldn't understand it.
So
that's a great composer, not to,
Mm-hmm.
Was Stephen Foster from Bardstown, Kentucky, do you know?
I don't know exactly where.
I think he was. I'm willing to follow my own sword, but
I've never been to his old Kentucky home.
There you go. That would make sense.
I've never been to his old Kentucky home.
See, I'm just trying to get some street credibility for you. I think I'm right there. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Call me out on the little cliff notes, but I'm pretty sure that's where he's from.
Well, it's where the buffalo roam, and the skies are not cloudy nor gray.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some deer there too. Maybe some antelopes.
Yeah, that song's dear to my heart.
And probably a couple Teslas.
Now, yeah, and some charging stations.
By now, at a charging station.
Hey, so I'm my composition paper is on overload. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about what you do away from music. Let's not bring music up for this question here. When you step out of your skin and say, "Hey, I've been all over the world. I've been very successful. I'm an acclaimed national artist." What do you do away from music to kind of galvanize yourself back into music when you're on that grind mode?
Well, I'm right now filming down in Southern California in a place called Carlsbad. You probably don't know. It's near San Diego.
I lived in San Diego for 2 years, about 20 years ago, actually.
Oh, well, then you ought to know. Then you know where Carlsbad.
Carlsbad Caverns.
And so, yeah, Carlsbad Caverns.
Yep.
And so I go out and I'm filming. So away from the music, I like reading literature. I love physics lectures. I love to read up on history, of course, of every kind, American history, as well as, world history. I'm rereading The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbons, which, by the way, was read by Winston Churchill in World War I. His mother mailed it to him when he was on the front there fighting, and he'd be reading in his tent, laying down on his cot while the artillery was exploding around him. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon. That's a definitive work. It took him 20 years to write it and that. And I go, well, if you want to know about Marcus Aurelius or whoever you want, So I like that. I'm at a strip club right now. You just can't hear the music isn't loud enough. I'm just kidding.
It's like, that's a hell of a background you got there.
You said a script club, right? A script club, so you're actually writing. I think that's what he meant. I think that's what he meant.
A script club.
Yeah, there you go.
I said a script club.
See,
you're in San Diego, near Scripps Institute.
Yeah, Scripps Ranch. I worked in Scripps Ranch. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
See, I love it. I love a good script club.
Yeah. It's so educational. Right. Or as I tell my friends, talk to me about a girl, and I said, Daniel, I never think the stripper likes me. I'm not stupid.
Well, get your drums ready, guys, but in Indianapolis, you're trying to have the pole position.
Hey,
for the racing of the 500. Yeah, Jim Neighbors used to sing "Back Home Again" in Indiana. That's a good message for me there. So,
he's a wonderful singer.
Hey, talk to us a little bit about. I know you mentioned it kind of off camera, if you will, but talk to us a little bit about your. I think you have a project or possibly a record or a new composition coming out. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
I'm always recording, meaning audio files, regular, streaming things, or filming video performance, So what I'm doing right now is I have a 32 album catalog, as I mentioned, and 310 tracks. And right now I'm in negotiations with a couple firms about that. I have one album outside of that is with Warner Brothers and Hit Lab, but those are leased tracks and they come back to me in November. I don't know if I'm going to continue my relationship with them. So that's what I'm doing right now in terms of music, projects or negotiations and that. That's what I've been doing, the past few weeks.
Cool. I want to jump back for just a second. Okay. So I want to just kind of to bring it all together. I want to just put a scenario out there. Let's say that we'll just take any planet. We'll say Venus, right? We'll say Venus is the planet of music. Okay. And let's say that you were sent to to the world, but more specifically the United States to change the culture of music right now. So they said
Venus.
From Venus, okay? So because that's where
I'm from Venus.
You're from Venus, and that's where like Mozart came from, and that's where
he did.
It's where Bach and all of them.
Well, I met him in a small borough in Venus.
See, there you go. There you go. See, and I knew this. I'm just premonition. So so you're sitting here by the president of Venus, and he says, I want you to change music, but you have to meet it where it's at today. So, like you're you have to factor in what people are like today with the hip hop, with the rock music, everything. How do you think, first of all, do you think that's something that you could potentially accomplish in a story? Like, obviously no one's going to accomplish that now, but
kill them all, let God sort them out.
Like, so that's the simple way, though, right?
Look, I'm all for simplicity myself. Okay. So I have said that I do not believe that anything new has happened since, let's say, 1915. 20 even. So I don't believe that's orally possible, but other people do, and they're looking. So I'll give you an idea about a composition. When people say, so I'll answer your question this way, Jonathan, you must write on the guitar. And I'd say, of course not. I would never write on the guitar. Well, what do you mean? And I go, well, I know how to play the guitar. So why would I want to write on an instrument I know how to play? That limits me. I go, I will take a keyboard just to check sound sources and make sure I'm accurate because I'm not a keyboardist. So what does that mean? I go, well, everyone thinks that the orchestration is the music. Oh, it's a four-man group. Oh, it's this rhythm. And I go, no. One of the first things you learn in composition to get away from the idea of melody and chords, which is the opposite for rappers. They should go toward that. One of the first things you learn is you want to do a composition for two non-pitch percussion instruments so you can get away from the idea of that hierarchy. Now, the raps are different. The rappers is the opposite of that. They need to go into the melody and harmony area. Oops. My brain fell out. So I don't believe that anything new can be. And when I was probably 25, I looked into the abyss and I said, well, the possibilities are there. But the colors and the wonderful compositions you can enjoy. But do I believe there is a way for innovation? Not in the way people think. Because the composition is very different from the orchestration. I can have a piccolo play the same line as a bassoon, put it down an octave. I can have a E-flat trumpeter, play the line that a violin or a viola da gamba or a cello would play. And that will change the timbre and the color and the balance. But that does not alter the composition.
Now, what if there was a new instrument? Because like before instruments, there was like a
source.
Like
it's meaningless.
So there was what was it? It started with
source.
Vocal, right? Like it started with vocals before there was instruments like Gregorian monks, whatever, right? And
Ask
then
Yoko Ono. When it started with vocal. So, did you ever see that thing where John Lennon was on Mike Douglas' show and he was playing with his hero Chuck Berry when John Lennon was what did they call him? A greaser or a rocker or a mocker or whatever they call him. But I go, a teddy boy. That's what he was. And he was playing with his hero, Chuck Berry, whom he loved because all that early rock, he loved it. And so his wife goes up and she starts going, she starts doing her thing. And Chuck Berry's like, he's like,
the beloved Yoko Ono.
What the hell? Yeah, the beloved. It's not a cut on her. It's just to show how he reacted. And Chuck Berry was going like, what the hell did I get myself into?
No,
right?
Jonathan, I'm going to give you a quick dosage of irony here, and then I'm going to give you kind of a wrap up a little bit. So the thing I'm most interested about Jonathan, Nick, as you were pulling up his information, is Jonathan Taylor is the tailback for the Indianapolis Colts here in the 317.
Yeah, we're like, that's not him.
So I'm super impressed that this badass here has gone all over the country playing music. Then he throws his Colts gear on a Sunday and appeases our local 317.
I did.
They're downtown Indy.
And I even look like a black person. Look at me. It's so obvious.
Soul.
So I know Jonathan. So when I tell people to type Jonathan Taylor guitar, because if you don't type guitar, you'll get this wonderful football player.
Thank you.
I know that a great artist. Hope one day I can meet him sometime. I'm sure.
Yeah, from he played ball in Wisconsin. So here's what I'll say to you. This was interesting to me because to be brutally honest with you, like I hadn't heard some of these names since high school. That one of my best memories was in a I'm going to call it a pit. My composer / music teacher in high school would have us set on the 3 levels. So I'm assuming the acoustics would balance out. Sorry, I'm not an expert, but here's what I will say. This was actually a cool conversation because I look at you as a guy that takes pride in their craft. My family's been in education for 105 years. You take pride in your craft. You're a master's level at what you do. You study it. The answers that you were giving, man, were so interesting because even though I didn't understand and hear of that, and I really liked your best answer of the night to me, I know it wasn't music, but you made it music, was Dali, and I'm glad you ran with that because that meant something to me. And you kind of just galvanize the two, almost like a weld where you've got a nice, flow to it, and it just kind of kept coming together. So keep doing great things.
Now, his favorite answer was the Scripps Club.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd say that was definitely my that was my favorite.
Always writing scripts.
Always.
Well, what do they say? Now they say ones in the front, 20s in the back. Or no, I didn't say that. Say edit that. Edit that.
So,
Hell no.
And that classical guy, Jonathan Taylor, that classical guy, he's such a square. All he is, he's a very boring square guy.
No, not at all. No, so like one thing that I'd like to say is I'm kind of like with Jason. No matter, first of all, I love music, but like even if I didn't, anything that I see that somebody has such compassion for, even if it's an opinion, if I disagree with you, but you are firm on your convictions and your passions, I respect you. Yeah. And I think that that's an amazing thing. And you can always tell when someone's real and whenever it's just, what did you say at the beginning with the strap? But you know what I mean? Like you can tell when it's real and when you're just kind of going through the motions, right? So,
and the thing is, I think in music, the true reason why I have the following or the music and that is because I'm authentic and real, and I communicate that. And I don't think people like phony balonies.
I don't either.
I think there's a natural thing against them that they go, oh yeah, right. So my old homestead now is gone.
Oh man.
Oh.
Now I didn't live there recently.
Okay.
That was my father's home,
yeah.
Meaning the family home, right? And but I can tell you that there is no Pacific Palisades. And when you're born somewhere, and now all of a sudden I go, it's gone.
Yeah.
It does not exist.
Yeah.
I mean, when people say, I go, no, it's insane. I mean, it's the craziest thing you ever saw. It looked like Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looked like an atomic bomb went off. And all those places I walked by that reservoir 1,000 times. I went to this restaurant here and did that one there. And, so, I'm telling you guys something that was just totally unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you have the thought of like what your childhood home is for most people, I mean, unless you had a horrible childhood, but for most people, like just the thought of that makes you feel safe. And when something like that is gone, like permanently gone, I can't imagine what that feeling is like.
Permanently, yeah.
Only impersonating one person that you mentioned tonight.
Oh, I know who it is.
Okay, who's that? Let's hear it.
The Cubs are doing a great thing tonight, folks. 1967, Tom Brenneman, Harry Carey here. 2 hot dogs for a nickel. I can get 2 hot dogs for a nickel, and let's have a bud.
Big Harry Carey fan. That shaped my career. The reason I get to live vicariously through interviews like this is taking broadcasting school 25 years ago, not getting ever scratched the itch. Being on a podcast, it's like a slice of heaven for me.
Well, now this is the thing. This is the new way.
I was just really glad we got to see different sides of you. I thought this would be music, but this was music, life, humor,
Next time we'll talk about music.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And we'll talk a little bit about music. And I'm happy to talk again because this was a lot of fun. And you are regular guys, and I appreciate your show. And it's wonderful, and I'm happy for your success.
Thank you.
And you guys are going to even just go higher and higher, and I'm happy for it. This is the medium, man, right here.
Yeah.
This is it.
100% agree.
Yep, and really, totally. For us, I mean, the best part of this is getting to meet people. I mean, like every week we meet somebody new, and like I feel like we get a new friend. You know what I mean? Like we've gained a new friend every week. So it's great. We've met a lot of really cool people through this.
And how long you been doing it? 2 years, a year?
We just had our year anniversary about what?
A year.
It was it was
about a year and 3
mid-February.
weeks. Yep. Mid 3 weeks. Yep. Year and 3 weeks. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is so great. And
But
you're just going to build and build.
That's the hope.